The Romans are coming, and what does a Romano-Gallic schoolhouse look like? Yes, we're back to studying architecture in this installment. And Shakespeare, too. And Roman latrines. It's a wild one, so get ready for it. Welcome back to Page by Toutatis, an overly thorough examination of Asterix, panel by panel, page by page, Brutus by Brutus. Today we're looking at the 11th page of Asterix Volume 7, Asterix and the Big Fight. It's easy to make fun of Chief Vital Statistics. As I've covered ad nauseum in this series already, he's an awful leader of men without any ability to plan ahead for the safety of his village. It's part of what makes him so entertaining, though. And then there's his occasionally combative relationship with his wife, his laziness in being carried around on a shield, and his reliance on Asterix to do all the work and or thinking that needs to be done. And then there's this speech at the top of page 11. It is not inspiring. Let's be honest, it's all plot recap, which makes sense, as the story was originally told in weekly installments in Pilote magazine, so it's a smart idea to keep the new readers up to speed on what's going on, in case they're, just starting their subscription or something. He's announcing to the village that, basically, they're royally screwed. The druid is down, we have no magic potion, and so we have a plan. But wait for it, this is his ingenious plan, and it's stolen straight out of the brilliant Elmer J. Fudd's playbook. Be very, very quiet. Keep quiet, tell nobody, and it will all work itself out. Sure, that's going to work. Vital Statistics here is running on a platform of hope, and that's always an election winner, right? I'm sorry, I tried really hard to mimic that hope poster style, but all I pulled off here is a bad anaglyph 3D image, which does not work in 3D, don't put your glasses on. Still, I put a lot of work into it, so I'm going to keep talking here, so I have an excuse to keep it up on screen longer to justify the time I put into it making this thing. Thanks for humoring me. I do feel better now. But the punchline is that he's laid out everything that's wrong and plays to the crowd with an inspirational line to give them good feelings. We have nothing to fear except the sky falling on our heads. The end. Well, yeah, sure. We could soon be at war with no chance of winning, but so long as a meteor doesn't fall from the sky and wipe us all out, we're good. 3 things about that first panel. First, yep, they're standing on the line at the bottom of the panel again. I love that layout. It's a perfect setup for it, too. It's a crowd scene filled with generic villagers. In a later volume, Uderzo would no doubt be sure to stock it with regular characters like unhygienics or fully automatics, etc. But right now, it's just a lineup of random Gallic characters. Big bushy mustaches, long hair, etc., etc. Second, you can see Cacophonix's harp getting thrown into the air with a few stars flying away at the source. So I'm trying to figure out, was someone beating him up because he's just so annoying? Or was he trying to sing as Vital Statistics came up to speak, in which case, yeah, then the reaction might be warranted. Or perhaps maybe he was just surprised at this bad news, and that's what caused him to flip his harp. It basically sprung out of surprise. If you have a theory, please let me know. Third, Vital Statistics starts his speech by addressing the crowd as friends, Gauls, countrymen. That ought to sound familiar, obviously. Friends, Romans, gentlemen, lend me your ears is Marc Antony's line in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, just before he gives one of the most beautifully scathing speeches you can imagine.
Here, under the leave of Brutus and the rest, for Brutus is an honourable man, so they all honourable men, come I to speak in Caesar's funeral.
You want to talk about someone who loathes the honourable Brutus for what he's done, but doesn't want to come right out and say it? Read that speech now. It is brilliant. Vital Statistics, though, is not quite that literary, but man, do I love that speech. By the way, I included this book cover you see here because it cracked me up. Asterix fans will recognize it. That's the classic painting of Vercingetorix laying down arms at Caesar's feet. At Caesar's feet, not on Caesar's feet. There's a big difference. René Goscinny will tell you the whole story. Vercingetorix isn't in Shakespeare's play at all, though. I think this book publisher just took the first public domain picture they could find that had a painting with Caesar in it and slapped it on the cover without thinking for half a second about what they were doing. Other publishers understood the assignment much better. As for Brutus himself, he has appeared multiple times in the stories of Asterix. You can find him in other Asterix books, such as Asterix the Gladiator, as a watcher of the games in Rome. Asterix and the Roman Agent, where he uses brute force, pun intended, obviously. Asterix and the Soothsayer, I just love this image of him sitting there sharpening his dagger while Caesar takes a safety briefing, and the man there in front of him talks about how he has nothing to fear. Oh boy, as long as Brutus is near him. Goscinny really did like to hammer that home. Asterix and Son, where he's the main villain. Also, there's a scene in that book that might look familiar to Netflix Asterix fans. And as a bonus, he pops up in the Fabcaro scripted Asterix and the White Iris. As you can see over the years, Uderzo's interpretation of Brutus changed from book to book, and Didier Conrad continued that tradition in White Iris there. And if you also look at the book over the course of the 40 years that Uderzo drew it, you'll also find many variations on Julius Caesar. Now, let's get back to the chief and that speech. So in that panel where he talks about the only thing we have to fear is the sky falling on us, we immediately think of the only thing to fear coming from Franklin Roosevelt's classic, The Only Thing We Have to Fear is Fear Itself, which came from Roosevelt's first inauguration in 1933.
That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance.
And he was kind of sort of right, you know? So much of the damage during times of economic worry is done by people afraid of the economy, not necessarily the actual state of the economy itself. It's the old self-fulfilling prophecy thing that Roosevelt was talking against, hoping to spur a nation in the middle of a Great Depression to get back to work. And to be fair to Vital Statistics, the sky didn't actually fall on Gaul until about 40 years later in Asterix and the Falling Sky, Uderzo's final book, in one which many readers felt like they got hit over the head with by something so painful that it must have fallen from the sky, but that's a story for a different video altogether. We haven't visited with Cassius Ceramix since page 4, and so we return to Linoleum now to catch up with him as he keeps busy visiting local school children. Not just any school children, but the children at Professor Berlitz's School of Modern Languages, where they're learning the alphabet. But to make them even more Roman, they're learning Latin. One of the resources I've drawn on for background information on the entire Asterix series is at asterix.openscroll.org, a delightfully 90s website filled with basic HTML, lots of plain tables, and a site that isn't even set up for HTTPS in the year of our Lord 2025. I assume that it's going to die any day now, and I've assumed that for years, and it'll be sad to see it go, but so far it's still hanging in there. But it points out that this schoolchild is reciting the first declension of the Latin nouns mensa. Mensa meaning table, it is the traditional example given for a first declension feminine noun. I didn't study Latin, I have no idea what any of this means, but it kind of sounds funny if you read it just right. A Latin noun is usually declined in the order nominative, vocative, accusative, gentive, dative, and ablative. Hence, for the singular, mensa, 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 mense, mense, mensa. I apologize to all Latin scholars for what I just said, what I just mispronounced, and I still have no idea what I just said. Here's the same info in a tabular format that might make more sense for those of you who majored in the classics or something. But I also wonder if that verb was chosen over something like, the verb for to love or something, because it's the name in modern day times, even in the 60s, of an organization of super smart people. Do people still know what Mensa is? Growing up, it was almost common parlance. You'd say someone wasn't exactly a Mensa member or Mensa material when you were pointing out how dumb they were. It was used in Hollywood scripts, stand-up comics, dad jokes. It was fairly common enough. But I can't remember the last time I heard someone actually utter the name of Mensa. Does Gen Z even know it at all? I kinda doubt it. Professor Berlitz's name references Maximilian M.D. Berlitz, a German man who emigrated to the U.S. in 1870 and founded the Berlitz Language Schools. His method of learning languages is basically immersion learning, which changed the way many learned languages at that point. He also had a mustache that would have fit in very well in Gaul. The teacher in the school here in Linoleum is clean-shaven since he had converted to a life of a Gallo-Roman, but the hairstyle is similar enough otherwise. The Berlitz brand is still alive, although it's traded hands a few times in the last 40 years. It does include, though, many of the books that Berlitz once wrote in the first half of the 1900s. They're still in print, believe it or not. And the company is based today in Princeton, New Jersey, a little more than an hour or so away from me here, so maybe I should stop by someday and ask someone there to sign my Asterix book. Now, there's a lot wrong historically with this page, and I come not to bury Goscinny here, but to praise him, because it's a funny page. And the sight of school children in ancient Rome in a classroom like this with a proper blackboard and posters on the wall is just fun. And as a reminder, that's what these comics should be. It's fun to learn about Roman history as a side effect of them, but understand that they're transposing then-current norms into ancient Roman times without regard for historical accuracy. It's charming, and it's funny, and that's enough for me. But if you had a YouTube series where you pick this kind of thing apart, you might want to point out that there was no public education per se in ancient Rome, really. Education was done privately in smaller groups by teachers paid by the parents to educate their children. The teacher would set up a place to teach the kids, often in the back of a shop, or even outdoors under the shade of a tree. There were no desks. There were also no blackboards, which didn't really exist until, I think, the 1800s or so. And the Roman Colosseum wasn't built in a day, but it also wasn't built until more than 100 years after this particular scene. Funny enough, this is the second reference to the Colosseum in the book so far. See the video for page 2 for the first reference. This boy's name is Prawns and Aspics, which I had to look up because I didn't get the reference. Prawns in aspic. A prawn is a large shrimp. I knew that much, but aspic is something I didn't know about. It turns out it's a gelatin or a jello mold. So imagine making a jello mold and including shrimp in it. Google it, because I couldn't find a picture of it that I could use without permission here, so that's left as an exercise to the viewer, but it's supposed to be quite a savory meal. Not exactly what I'm looking for in a dessert, but to each his own. And if you want to know more about the situation with bathrooms in ancient Rome and what Prawns and Aspics had to go through after he left the classroom, I'll leave a link below to a great article about it. Warning, it's not pleasant. Really, the bathroom in ancient Rome was a great place for conversation. They had conversations in a lot of places in Rome. They loved to talk, to orate, to battle, to debate. They loved that kind of stuff. But in the Roman bathroom, you were sitting quite literally cheek to cheek next to someone while handling your business. And the water from public baths was used to essentially flush everything away. And they used a sponge at the end of a stick No, seriously. Go read the article. I have to get back to Asterix now. This is a little distracting. One last little thing here. Artists hate drawing horses. They also hate drawing bicycles, but that's not a big issue for a book set in ancient Rome or the wild whoops. But this horse made me stop and stare for a moment. What's going on with his hindquarters back there? Is that another of Uderzo's favorite movement clouds? Kind of a funny place for them, though, but you can see some cool action lines under the horse's tail, so maybe it's that? But then I saw the same pattern on his front legs, and it dawned on me that's where the Roman soldier riding him probably kicks him to keep him running, right? Keep in mind that the messenger's job is to go as fast as possible, so leaving those marks would be likely. It's a nice little touch from Uderzo, though I do wonder if they're not overemphasized a little bit in the modern remastering of the art, where in the original Pilote printings they might have been more subtle, given the printing fidelity and the limited color palette they had at the time. Stay tuned, because I need to talk about that most recent remastering of the art and the colors. It's changed a bunch over the years, but we still have 33 pages to go. I'll find a good spot for that somewhere, I promise. Next time, Cassius Ceramix is marching to the village, and everything is about to blow up. For reviews of every Asterix book, check out the Asterix agenda over at pipelinecomics.com, or click on these suggested videos for more about the glory of Asterix. Like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and I'll see you back here on the next page.